Every currency that has ever died followed the exact same pattern. Every single one. Debt explosion, then money printing, then inflation denial, then collapse. Rome did it. Weimar Germany did it. Zimbabwe did it. Argentina is doing it right now. Different flags, different centuries, same death spiral. And here is what should terrify you. This is not some obscure theory buried in dusty history books. The pattern is playing out right now in the largest economy on Earth. Today, I am going to walk you through the exact sequence, step by step, that has preceded every currency collapse in recorded history. And by the end of this video, you will never look at your money the same way again. Most people think currency collapses happen suddenly. One day everything is fine, the next day your money is worthless. But that is a lie. Currency collapses are slow at first, and then all at once. As Ernest Hemingway wrote about going bankrupt. How did you go bankrupt? Two ways. Gradually, then suddenly. That is exactly how currencies die. There is a sequence. A predictable, repeatable sequence that has played out dozens of times across thousands of years of human civilization. And it always starts the same way. A government faces a crisis. War, pandemic, political upheaval. Something that demands enormous spending. And so the spending begins. But here is the critical detail that most economists conveniently leave out. Spending never stops. The crisis passes, but the spending does not. The emergency measures become permanent fixtures. The temporary programs become untouchable institutions. And the debt begins to compound. Quietly. Relentlessly. This is stage one of the pattern. And by the time most citizens notice anything wrong, stage two has already begun. But before I show you stage two, there is something most history books deliberately leave out. Stage one is always debt, not just any debt. Unsustainable, compounding, completely out of control debt. And it always begins with the same promise. We will pay this back. This is temporary. We just need a little more time. Sound familiar? It should. Because every government in history has whispered those exact words before the collapse. The pattern kicks into gear when a nation's debt crosses a critical threshold. Economists debate the exact number, but history points somewhere between 60 and 90% of GDP. Beyond that line, something fundamental breaks. The math stops working. Interest payments devour more and more of the national budget. And to cover those interest payments, the government borrows even more, which creates more interest, which demands more borrowing, which generates even more interest. It is a loop, a death spiral feeding on itself. Borrow, spend, repeat. Look at the historical record. Rome in the 3rd century, France before the Revolution, Britain after the World Wars. Ludwig von Mises warned us decades ago, there is no means of avoiding the final collapse of a boom brought about by credit expansion. But governments never listen. Because when debt becomes unmanageable, they always reach for the same tool, the most dangerous weapon in any government's arsenal. Stage two. When the debt becomes unpayable, governments discover a magic trick. They print money. They do not call it that, of course. They call it quantitative easing. They call it monetary stimulus. They call it emergency liquidity provisions. But it is all the same thing, printing money to pay debts. Rome clipped its coins, mixing cheaper metals into the silver denarius until it contained almost no silver at all. The Chinese Song dynasty printed paper notes until they became worthless kindling. Weimar Germany fired up the presses until citizens needed wheelbarrows of cash to buy a single loaf of bread. Debasement, that is the technical term, currency debasement. And it follows debt explosion as surely as night follows day, every single time, without exception. The new money floods the system. At first, it feels like a miracle. Markets rise, spending increases, everyone feels wealthier, but it is an illusion, a sugar rush before the crash. Everything is fine. If you are starting to see how this pattern repeats across centuries, hit like and subscribe to keep exposing what they hide. Because the next stage is the one that fools almost everyone. The stage where they look you straight in the eye and lie. Stage 3. This is where the playbook gets truly sinister. After the debt explodes and the printing accelerates, inflation starts creeping upward. But instead of acknowledging it, Every government in history has done the exact same thing. They deny it. Inflation is transitory. Those three words have echoed through every civilization that preceded a currency collapse. Transitory, temporary, under control. The Roman Emperor Diocletian blamed greedy merchants for skyrocketing prices. He issued a decree setting maximum prices for over 1,000 goods. The penalty for charging more: death. It did not work. It has never worked. It will never work. The French government blamed speculators before the assignat collapsed into nothing. The Weimar Republic blamed foreign interference for the mark's destruction. Zimbabwe blamed Western sanctions. Venezuela blamed capitalist sabotage. Blame, deny, deflect. The script is identical every single time. First, they deny inflation exists. Then they blame external forces. Then they quietly change how inflation is measured so the official numbers look acceptable. They literally redefine reality to hide the truth from you. And this is the trap, because the denial phase can stretch on for years, even decades. And during all that time, something invisible is quietly dissolving everything you have ever saved. Stage 4, the tipping point. Here is something every economics textbook should put on its very first page, but never does. A currency is not backed by gold. It is not backed by productivity. It is not backed by military power. A currency is backed by one thing, and one thing only: confidence. That is it. The entire global financial system runs on belief. Belief that the paper in your wallet, the digits on your screen, will hold their value tomorrow. And confidence has a peculiar nature. It builds slowly over decades of stability, but it can shatter in a single moment. As John Maynard Keynes himself warned, there is no subtler, no surer means of overturning the existing basis of society than to debauch the currency. In every currency collapse throughout history, there is a triggering event, one crack that shatters the illusion. In Weimar Germany, it was France occupying the Ruhr industrial heartland. In Zimbabwe, it was the violent land reform seizures. In Argentina, it was the Corralito, when the government froze every bank account in the country overnight. Frozen. One event, one fracture. And suddenly, the confidence that held everything together evaporates. Trust gone overnight. People stampede to convert their currency into anything real. Gold, foreign currency, property, food. And once that stampede begins, nothing on earth can stop it. The question is never whether confidence breaks. It always breaks. The question is what triggers it, and history provides some truly terrifying answers. 1918. Germany loses the Great War. The Treaty of Versailles imposes reparations the nation could never realistically afford, and the government responds exactly as you would expect by now. They printed money. Watch the 4 stages unfold in textbook sequence. 1. War debt exploded past sustainable levels. 2. Government printed marks to fund reparations. 3. Officials insisted inflation was temporary. 4. Confidence collapsed when France seized the Ruhr. By 1923, prices were doubling every few days. A loaf of bread that cost 250 marks in January cost 200 billion marks by November of that same year. Citizens burned banknotes for warmth because the paper was literally cheaper than firewood. Entire lifetimes of savings were wiped out in weeks. As historian Adam Ferguson documented in his study of the catastrophe, the mark was not just devalued, it was annihilated. But here is the detail most people miss about Weimar. The collapse did not happen because of the printing. The printing had been going on for years. The collapse happened because the German people finally stopped believing their government could fix it. Belief died first. The currency died second. But Weimar was not the first. This exact pattern had already played out centuries earlier in the greatest empire the world had ever known. The Roman denarius survived for nearly 500 years. It was one of the most trusted currencies in the history of human civilization, and its destruction followed the exact same 4-stage pattern. In the 1st century, the denarius was 95% pure silver. Under Emperor Nero, it dropped to 93%. Under Marcus Aurelius, 80%. Under Septimius Severus, 50%. Each emperor shaved a little more silver, and hoped nobody would notice. And for generations, nobody did. That is the terrifying part. The debasement was so gradual, so incremental, that it was virtually invisible to citizens living through it. Voltaire would later summarize the eternal lesson of debased currency. Paper money eventually returns to its intrinsic value, zero. By the reign of Gallienus in the 260s, the denarius contained barely 5% silver. 5% silver. Soldiers demanded higher pay. Merchants raised prices. The empire that once ruled the known world was slowly strangling itself on its own debased currency. Diocletian tried price controls. Constantine launched an entirely new currency, but the damage was irreversible. Rome did not fall in a single day. It inflated itself to death across 2 centuries, and the citizens of Rome at the time, they had no idea. They thought rising prices were simply how the world worked. Sound familiar? Because the modern version of this ancient story is unfolding right now. The United States dollar became the world's reserve currency in 1944 at the Bretton Woods Conference. It was backed by gold. 1 ounce equaled $35. Then in 1971, President Nixon severed the link between the dollar and gold. Decoupled. He called it a temporary measure. Temporary for 50 years. As J.P. Morgan himself once testified before the United States Congress, gold is money. Everything else is credit. Since 1971, the dollar has lost over 97% of its purchasing power. And the national debt, it stood at $400 billion in 1971. Today, it surpasses $35 trillion. The debt has grown nearly 90 times larger in just 50 years. Now apply the pattern. Stage 1, debt explosion. The US debt to GDP ratio exceeds 120%. Check. Stage 2, money printing. The Federal Reserve created more dollars between 2020 and 2022 than in its entire previous century of existence. Check. Stage 3, inflation denial. You already heard those 3 famous words. Transitory. Check. Stage 4, loss of confidence. That is the stage the world is quietly approaching. China, Russia, Saudi Arabia, Brazil, India. Nations representing billions of people are steadily reducing their dollar reserves. They are not announcing it, but the pattern is unmistakable. And this raises a question most financial analysts refuse to answer. Here is the question that should keep you awake tonight. If this pattern is so predictable, so thoroughly documented, so obvious to anyone who cracks open a history book, then why does it keep happening? Because currency collapse is not a bug in the system, it is a feature. Follow the money. When a currency collapses, who loses? Savers lose, workers lose, pensioners lose, the entire middle class loses. People who followed every rule and stored their earnings in the very currency being systematically destroyed. And who gains? Those standing closest to the money printer. Banks, insiders, elites. There is even a name for this mechanism. The Cantillon effect, named after the 18th century economist Richard Cantillon. The first recipients of newly created money benefit the most because they spend it before prices adjust upward. By the time that new money filters down to ordinary citizens, prices have already risen. Inflation is taxation without legislation. Every round of money printing is a massive wealth transfer, from the bottom to the top, from the many to the few, from those who earn their money to those who have the privilege of printing it. And the most brilliant part of the scheme, most people never realize it is happening. They blame corporations. They blame supply chains. They blame foreign governments. They blame anything and everything except the actual cause. The pattern keeps repeating because it enriches the very people who control the pattern. And that brings us to the single most important truth of all. I told you at the beginning of this video, the sequence never changes. Debt explosion, money printing, inflation denial, loss of confidence, collapse. Timing is everything. The only variable that ever changes from one collapse to the next is timing. Rome took 200 years. Weimar took 5. Zimbabwe took less than a decade. Argentina has been cycling through it for generations. The pattern does not care about your political affiliation. It does not care about your nation's military budget. It does not care about your opinion. It cares only about mathematics. When debt exceeds the ability to repay, the end game is always the same. So what do you do with this knowledge? First, recognize the pattern. After this video, you understand more about currency collapse than the vast majority of people walking this earth. That alone puts you ahead. Second, act on what you know. Diversify beyond any single currency. Own tangible assets. Study history instead of reacting to headlines. Think in decades, not in news cycles. And third, never believe anyone who tells you that this time is different. As Mark Twain wisely put it, history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. The rhyme is echoing right now. The only question is whether you can hear it. If you made it this far, comment debt spiral to prove you see the pattern now. Every government lies. The question is, what are they lying about?